Chairman Mason, I'm going to stand in for Commissioner Thomas, who's asked to be excused tonight. Let's see. So I'll open up our invocation or thought. We had Commissioner Watson's slated for that. He is not present. Do we have a volunteer to give us a thought or a prayer thought? Any kind of a Mr. Barker, would you do that? And then Commissioner Nancaro is going to lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance.
Our Father in heaven, give us North Ogden City Planning Commission meeting. We're grateful for this opportunity to be here and be able to serve the city and the people who live here. And as we bless as we go through this process, to keep in mind who we serve and who are to serve, and not tell them what to do. I mean, work hard to come to consensus on those things which we disagree on, and come to the best decision. Will help everybody out. In His name, Jesus Christ. Amen.
Amen.
Please stand for the pledge.
I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, as previously stated, Commissioner Chairman is asked to be excused and Commissioner Watson as well. Let the record note that who else are we missing? Commissioner Lunt is missing as well, and I guess that's excused.
Did you say Thomas?
Yeah, Chairman Thomas. Yeah, I think I said that. So we do have a quorum. We can proceed with our meeting. We have been asked to approve the minutes for the last two Planning Commission meetings, which were February 16th and March 16th. Has anyone had a chance to review those and make a motion to approve? Or any edits to those?
I'll make the motion to approve the February 16, 2022 and March 16, 2022 Planning Commission meetings.
So moved.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any consideration or any discussion on that? Okay, all in favor of that approval, voice vote? Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you. Okay, I don't have the copy of our opening meeting statement in front of us, but I'm.
So the motion all included the February 16th meeting.
So he didn't grab both of those? I think he said March 16th and February 16th, didn't
Okay.
Yeah.
he? I heard that.
Sorry. Okay.
Okay.
Here's
And
the
Commissioner
opening
Nancaro,
meeting
you still
statement.
seconded that, right?
I did.
For both those? Okay.
Do you want that?
Okay, I will read this. Before each agenda item begins, city staff will give a report. After the staff report, the item will be open for other speakers. The applicant will speak first, will be allowed up to 10 minutes. Following the applicant, any other interested person will be allowed to speak for up to 3 minutes. The applicant has final rebuttal time of up to 5 minutes, and any materials that are referenced, for example, pictures or written materials, are part of the record and must be left with the commission. Speakers are required to have signed in at the door. Will state their name and address before beginning their remarks. If you agree with the previous speaker, then please state your agreement to avoid repetitious remarks. Speaker shall address the commission from the podium or microphone and shall address all comments to the planning commission. And as an act of courtesy, please silence your cell phones. For those of you attending on Zoom, same rules apply. We just ask that if you would like to be elevated to a speaker position, that you use the hand raise function on the Zoom call. And we will elevate you at that time. We'd ask that you maintain the same decorum and the same respect to the time limitations placed there. John, do we have anyone on Zoom?
We do have one participant right now.
Okay, so noted that we do have a Zoom participant following along who may choose to engage at the proper time. Let's see. Ex parte communications or conflict of interest to disclose. Do we have anyone that has had any ex parte communications or may feel conflict of interest in anything on our agenda tonight?
No.
Okay, duly noted. Okay, item number 5 brings us to public comments for items not on the agenda. Again, if you would like to speak to our item on the agenda tonight, we'll give you, there will be opportunity for that. If there's a general comment, we'd like to hear from it now. We'd like to hear it now. Okay, noted that there were no other additional public comments. This brings us to the meat of our meeting, which is going to be brief tonight. We have one administrative item. It is the consideration and action regarding the application and preliminary plat approval. I thought this already had preliminary plat approval. Oh, that was for the zone, not the subdivision. Okay. Okay, so preliminary plat approval of Shaw Century Farms, which is 36 lots located approximately 300 East Pleasant View Drive. And the agenda says that Scott Hess will be our presenter, but I'm assuming it's going to be Brandon Bell.
That's correct.
Thanks, Brandon. Cheers.
Thank you. So again, this is 36 lot subdivision for Shaw Century Farm. It's approximately 6.35 acres and it's located 300 East Pleasant View Drive, just west of our old public works facility. And I'll go ahead and read the decision type statement for this type of project since it's our first but also only administrative decision. When the planning commission is acting as a land use authority, is acting in an administrative capacity and has limited discretion. Examples of administrative applications are conditional use permits, design reviews, and subdivisions. Administrative applications must be approved by the planning commission if the application demonstrates compliance with the approval criteria. Again, the applicant is requesting preliminary approval for this subdivision with 36 lots. There's the property is mostly vacant at this moment. As has been mentioned, there's a pending rezone application as well as a pending zoning text amendment. The zoning text amendment is scheduled to be considered by the city council on April 12th. In April of last year, the planning commission recommended approval of the applicant's original rezone request to multifamily residential R3 with a development agreement. The city council determined that R3 was not consistent with the general plan, was not appropriate in this area of the city. And so the city council, the staff and applicant have worked together for about 10 months to develop a proposal for small lot, single family concept for this subdivision and a zone that included enhanced open space to meet the needs of the residents, the city and the developer. The current preliminary plat was used as a concept plan during the zoning text amendment process, and the Century Farms zoning text amendment was developed to entitle the project as currently proposed. And that's what's going to be considered by the city council on the 12th. The proposed Century Farms zone that's related to this project is a modified version of the city's R15 zone. And those revisions provide flexibility in lot size, setback, and lot widths. The new zone would require a minimum lot size of 4,000 square feet, minimum lot width of 40 feet, and front setbacks of 20 feet unless the house is in front of the garage, in which case it may be 18 feet back. And so the lots in this proposed subdivision have been verified to meet the required square footage, lot width, and setback requirements for the proposed zone that's going to be considered by the council.
And Brandon, I'm sorry to interrupt. It may be helpful to ask or you to say, so we did review the specifications of the subdivision to some extent when we did the zone approval review. If there were any differences from the subdivision that you know of that occurred, maybe beneficial to us.
Differences from the subdivision from what was previously proposed.
From what was, because we looked at the subdivision in a little bit of detail when we reviewed the zone.
Okay.
Right. And so I was very comfortable at that point with what was being submitted. And so I think it'd be helpful if there were any changes made when the actual subdivision approval came in.
I'm not aware of any from that prior version, but Scott's also been reviewing it. So
that's fair. That's fair.
So
okay.
The block length is met on the version of the subdivision that's being presented to you. The cul-de-sac width is slightly narrower than the city standard, but has been accepted by the city engineer in the engineer's review memo. And the desire from the applicant as well as the city was for this subdivision to include public streets and not require a homeowners association. Small HOAs can often struggle to care for large private investments such as streets. And so that was the basis for that.
I have a question. Looking at this, the cul-de-sac width, there's a reason why you accepted it now, I don't see any houses facing that into that cul-de-sac. as you go into it.
I guess I'm not sure what you mean by houses facing into it. There would be
Like-
four.
There's
Like
no-
lot 3, you mean?
They look at lot 3, it looks like it faces to the west, not to the north. And same thing with 8. And so the width of the streets being allowed to be narrower because there's no houses in front of that street going into the cul-de-sac.
I don't think that was the basis for the street width. We can,
We'll have public comment discussion after the presentation. So, yeah, we can, let's pin that and let Brandon present, and then we'll have some discussion. Thanks.
the applicants provided utility will serve letters from Rocky Mountain Power, Dominion Energy, Pine View Water, and Comcast. And the applicant must meet the requirements in those will serve letters for approval prior to final approval of the subdivision. The developer has provided 2 open space areas on the plat, parcels A and B. If you could zoom out, John, so you could see those. Parcel A is on the eastern side of the subdivision and also is part of a well protection zone for the area. There's a well, you can see the radius of the well, the 100-foot protection area on that preliminary plat, which would also carve into the buildable area on lots 1 and 2 primarily. And then on the very, right there. So now in the center, there's parcel B, which is their storm detention parcel. And not shown on this plat is also what's being referred to as parcel C, which is just to the east of parcel A, which would be part of a development agreement with the city that would become open space. It's not on this because it'll be a separate subdivision, but it would adjoin parcel A. So again, parcel B would be the storm retention area. Parcel A would serve as a well protection area and serve as enhanced open space when combined with parcel C. And then the combined open space will be just over 1 acre. And the developer has agreed to provide a cash donation to assist the city with developing the park space on parcels A and C. There are existing agricultural structures on the site. There's essentially one that's on the northwestern side of the site. It's a green roofed building that remains. There's also been one that's already torn down. And then there's an existing water spring on the site, and the developer plans to pipe the spring water within an easement and divert it to the city's storm retention system. And let's see, I think the considerations for the planning commission include, does the proposed subdivision meet the requirements of the applicable city subdivision and zoning ordinances? And is the proposed subdivision consistent with the general plan? Staff's view is that the proposed subdivision meets the requirements of the applicable North Ogden City ordinances and conforms to the North Ogden City general plan with the requirements noted in this report. This area is in the downtown neighborhood, and the general plan map calls for this property to be developed as a mix of uses. The small lot, single family nature of the development represents a mixed housing type when compared to the surrounding properties. And staff believes that this development meets the intent of the general plan, and that the planning commission can find that the plat is in accordance with city ordinances and the general plan. I'm going to just go through the list of recommended conditions of approval. Just to be able to itemize them out so that they're all summarized. The requirements of these are the recommended conditions of approval by staff. The requirements of the North Ogden City Engineers Report must be met prior to final plat approval unless superseded in this report. And then all will serve letters must be submitted and their requirements for approval met prior to final approval of the subdivision. The existing agricultural structures be removed prior to the recordation of the final plat. And approval of the subdivision should be subject to the Century Farm zoning text amendment being approved by the city council. So this would be staff's officer recommending that this be subject to that approval for the zone. We can't have a subdivision without a zone being in place. And so this would be contingent on that. And then approval of the subdivision should be subject to an approved a development agreement outlining the open space requirements and financial donation from the park located on city property. I think that covers all of staff's concerns. I'll conclude with our recommendation that the Planning Commission grant preliminary approval of the Shaw Century Farm subdivision subject to the conditions recommended in the staff report. Does the commission have any questions for me?
I have one now. The east of A, well, that well protection area, is that going to be taken care of on by the city?
Yes, there's a parcel C that if you could pull up, I think it's exhibit C.
Yeah, that's just to the east of A.
Sorry, exhibit D. Yeah, I can show you what the parcel is proposed to be, parcel C right now. It's just not on the actual subdivision. So, yeah, so you can kind of see the line. You can see the letter C, and then there's two lines to the east showing the eastern boundaries of that.
Right.
When you said there was a cash donation coming that would help offset some of the costs of developing or maintaining that?
Yes, that's to be worked out with as part of a development agreement.
Okay, so but it is intended to be a park then, or you did
Yes.
mention the word park. Okay.
Okay.
So parcel C is that land the city currently owns?
Yes, it's part of our old public works site,
Yeah.
and so the city would carve off a section of that existing parcel and use it for park space.
You had mentioned that the radius around it kind of cut into the buildable area on lots 1, 2, and 3. Is that, how will that pan out?
So if you zoom in onto lots 1 and 2,
So they just have to build on the other side of that? Because
Yeah.
it looks like those are smaller units.
Lauren may have a comment.
I can get some input on.
Okay.
that when you're done.
You just can't fertilize your lawn.
Okay.
Okay, so we have a question for the applicant. We have a question for Lauren. Do we have any other questions for Brandon?
I have a question related to the well that was mentioned, but I can wait until after this.
Yeah, I have a procedural question, but I was going to hold it for the end. Why this was an administrative item versus a legislative, but we can hold that. I don't think the applicant would have much interest in that.
Okay.
Okay, so,
I'm happy to answer it whenever.
okay. Okay, so our procedure is to allow our applicant the first opportunity to speak to us, and there has been a couple of questions directed you guys' way, so would you care to, if you'd like? Okay.
Geneva, 1352 north, 1050 west.
And I know your last name, but do we have that?
Blanchard.
Thank you.
Okay, who wants to start?
I'm just curious on the width of the road going into the cul-de-sac. Why it's
So in-
narrower.
Lauren, correct me if I'm wrong, but we got approval from the fire marshal because of the length of it. It's like less than 150 feet. He felt okay with it being a smaller radius. Am I right on that?
That's partially true.
Okay.
I'll let
Okay.
some more.
And then it has something to do with the sidewalks, but I will let him
Okay.
answer that question. I know that the length of it was.
Yeah, it's
was
pretty
the reason.
short.
Mhm. That helped us.
I think the question I had was more for
Lauren. Are you talking about well, yeah, okay, I'll leave that one. We don't have, from when you guys saw the text amendment, we don't have anything different. The only thing that you guys will see in that, he made us add back in the percentage of square footage under rooftop, which is just mandatory, but that's the only change from it. I'm trying to think, will you zoom out, John, so I can just think of it, if there's anything else?
It looks essentially the same as the last version that we saw.
Exactly the same. We did ask on lot 34, just so you guys are completely in the know, on lot 34 and 14. So we had done setbacks to be 20 feet in the front. Or 5, do we do 5 or 10 feet on the side? 5 on the sides, and then 10 for corner, 15 for corner lots. And on 34 and 14, because of the configuration inside, we asked for an exception for those two lots to be 12-foot corner lot setbacks. But those are the only two. Every other plan fits on these lots as we asked.
And I'm going to ask Lauren, or if you know, if that interferes with our site triangle, then on that. If that would be the only concern there, would be.
And those are setbacks from the property lines. Our new site triangles are gonna be from the curb lines. So it gives us that much more. They shouldn't interfere.
Okay, I mean, that would obviously be the problem with that. And we understand that those setbacks are smaller here. And what this, at least I understand that, what this subdivision is. I've told you before, I think it's a nice transition from our downtown area to our, I think it transitions nicely. Obviously, my preference for that property is no development ever and let horses be there, but that everyone has that and we're not going to get that. But I do think this is nice transition for what exists surrounding this property and everything. So.
And all the structures will be removed, obviously, before we start. I think that really sums it up. The 35 and 6 will stay RE20. So that will not be rezoned essentially. But that's it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So if we could have the subdivision up again, the previous one. And that will show some of the, let's zoom in a little bit and we can see some of those radial lines out from the wellhead. A couple items. All wells have at least 3 or 4 zones. Well, they have 4 zones. 100-foot radius around every well has strict requirements. The next zone is a 250-day travel time of groundwater. And we have another little sort of red line that goes through lots 30, 31 up there. That's the 250 travel time area for this well. In zones 1 and 2, here, I'll just show you. This is here's the 100-foot radius.
Yeah.
Here is what we call zone 2.
Guess I don't understand when you say the water travel time. 250
Groundwater, as it's moving down slope underground, travels at a certain rate based on the porosity of the soils and that. And they've determined it takes about 250 days for water to travel across that area to the wellhead. And
You
so,
can't retire. Who's going to teach us this stuff?
Wow, that's cool.
Like, yeah,
I mean, we got the word porosity tonight.
right. Yeah.
The basic
Yeah.
perk test. It's like, let's pull that one out.
So on the 100-foot
Actually, that's
Yes.
moving pretty fast. That's moving pretty
circle,
fast.
Mr. Bell mentioned that it cuts into the buildable area on the
Yes.
lots.
and
So what does that mean for
we
the
did some
development?
investigation on that to see if that was all kosher with both the state codes and our city codes. Couple restrictions that are required in zone 1 is you can't have any sewer lines crossing that unless they're totally sealed. That means there can't be any leakage at all across there. In fact, we currently have one that crosses this area that this project's going to correct and get rid of that.
So how deep is that, the water level?
The groundwater, I don't know if we have a soil.
Yeah, we do.
Geotech
It
report.
varies though.
It varies from 12 to 6 feet.
So I think
Okay,
Yeah.
that's understandable, because that brings up concern, because you feel in an area like that, the water's moving that fast.
Yeah.
Are there going to be restrictions on what they can do as far as utilize or anything like that along there?
Normally there aren't, and I'll get to some of the restrictions that the state code has on wellhead protection zones.
Okay,
So in zone 1, very few things that can contaminate are allowed. But uses such as residential, multifamily, they even mention commercial, but are silent on industrial uses because those generally are the polluting.
this is obviously not the only wellhead we have in the
No.
city. And we obviously have homes built all around this 250-foot radius. I can think of
Yes.
a number of them. And so I'm not,
So we have a couple, in zones 1 and 2, we require a continuous pipe for the sewer line and for the laterals within those areas. And then at the boundary of between zones 1 and 2 and 2 and 3, they have to put a clay dike to stop any drainage that may come down the main line of the pipe and keep it out of that zone. But the only state restriction is regarding sanitary sewer. So no septic systems, no push through open pipe. It all has to be totally sealed and prohibit any exfiltration from those pipes into the groundwater for potential contamination.
So when you say continuous pipe, does that mean they have to buy a special length of pipe if it needs to be further, or?
What we normally will allow is fusible PVC or HDPE,
Okay,
where they actually weld them
Yeah.
together. And they weld the joints all together.
no,
And then
no
they
leaks
pressure,
essentially.
pressure
Yeah.
tested for leakage, so. So in our zones 1 and 2, we will require that type of sewer pipe to be installed. All the other beyond that can do our standard green, it's called STR 35.
But the dwelling, the structure above ground, like say on lot 2,
It is not. a
it's not,
problem.
okay, it's not
We can
impacted.
have,
Okay.
we can have parks, we can have grass, we can have other things like that. You just couldn't go and dump contaminants such as oils or other things out there.
No outdoor potty by breaks.
Yeah, yeah.
Thanks.
So and we do have, half a dozen wells throughout the city, and we have neighbors right up against those wells that exist today. I wouldn't say all of them meet our current requirements for the sewers, but as we find those issues, we'll recorrect those. So
And when you say a well like this, is this water that the city uses
this
as
is
part
a
of our?
culinary water well.
Wow.
If it were an irrigation or secondary water well, it doesn't have the same requirements.
So some of our city drinking water comes from this
Correct.
well.
Yes,
Okay, it's one of the 6 or whatever that have been
yes.
designated in the,
Uh-huh.
we've seen. it
We
in the
have a
reports and
series
stuff.
of wells and springs that feed our water system.
So this is pretty important because it's one of our, I mean, there's like 6 or 8 or how many do we have in the city?
I'm trying to think of the exact number. I don't know.
I remember reading a report. I want to say it was 6, but I can't
We
remember.
probably
for sure.
have 6 wells and half a dozen springs or more up the can.
Okay.
Some of the canyons.
But these are essentially our drinking water sources
Those
for
are
North
our
Ogden City.
sources.
So it's important.
Yes.
Thank you.
And as we are developing new well sites, which we have several designated throughout the city, we'll take into account what's surrounding them, and each one of those will have a wellhead protection zone designation for these 1, 2, 3, and 4 zones that will be generated. And each one's different based on what's underground and how the water is moving through the ground.
Okay,
But all
So-
wells will have initially 100-foot radius.
so our sewer will be handled. We're gonna seal that off and it'll be handled. And the structures on the ground don't create a problem for,
No,
we're not capturing all the water, obviously, in that 250 square feet, right?
no,
So,
it is not.
so the structures on top don't seem to pose a problem, so I don't see it. I don't see
Yeah.
it.
And
conflict
we checked
myself, but-
the state codes to see if there was any requirements, and a lot of them refer to additional city codes. And our city codes allow for residential, which this complies with within those zones.
So if anyone's uncomfortable with this, I'd like to point out my dairy farmer in-laws whose well water that they've drank from for 50 something years is right below about 400 head of cattle that are just drinking and peeing and pooing all day long.
It's like,
And
it's like
it's like-
yogurt water,
It's
right?
like 20 feet under those
I
cows.
mean, who needs
And like, I
probiotics?
only drink bottled water. But they're all fine.
Well,
So
we
far.
drank on the road.
I don't want to make light of that if anyone is concerned with this. I mean,
Here's a
obviously,
picture of health, so.
obviously don't let me,
Our whole farm was all well watered.
yeah.
Let me comment on the road width also.
Yeah.
A year ago, Senate Bill 409 was passed. And it requires or does not allow cities to require roadways larger than, and they don't talk about the right of way, they talk about the paved area, but curb to curb limit on local roads to 37 feet. our current standard is 41 feet.
Hmm.
And that is for a 60-foot right of way, 41 feet curb to curb. They narrowed it up to 37, so all we can require is 37 feet curb to curb. But we still can require the 60-foot right of way, but that additional width allows for a larger park strip that maybe they can incorporate LID, low impact development in. And when we've looked at this, the main road 300 is going in at a 66-foot right of way because it's a collector road. But these cul-de-sacs will be maximum 37. And that's curb to curb. So even our 50-foot right of ways, which we have several in the city, have sufficient room to put in enough curb. And also, we may not necessarily need the park strip in there. There can be sidewalk that will be adjacent to the curb. We do have enough right of way that in front of parcel A will be where they put the snow storage area. Because all cul-de-sacs will have a snow storage area. And that won't interfere then with anyone's driveways or anything like that.
So
I'm jealous of that.
Yeah, no
Yeah.
kidding.
That brings up a question between 3 and 8, because that's narrower. There will not be parking on the street right there.
And that may be an option.
Because like you go up 2100 north, I don't know why people park on the street there. It's not wide enough at this point.
We'll review that with the fire marshal. If that becomes a concern for access, if there's parking,
Okay,
then it may be signs such as
okay.
that, so.
So these smaller cul-de-sacs, like this one, for example, is there enough room for a garbage truck to turn around without a 3-point turn?
The radius on the cul-de-sac is sufficient.
It's just the narrow
It's just the
entrance
neck
point.
neck
Yeah.
of the road,
Okay.
so.
I have one question, a follow-on to what you were saying, this new legislation on the road width
Yes,
limitations, or like we can't limit it beyond that. We, in the past, have, I guess, allowed narrower road widths. But as a trade-off to that, we've required LID.
yes. And
Can we still do that?
yes, and the new legislation sort of ties those narrow
Okay,
roads
good.
with LIDs.
Okay.
And it's really not, they don't just say local roads, but they classify it as roadways with certain level of traffic. So if you're anything below this, which is basically below a collector level, the 37-foot is the maximum we can require curb to curb. And we will have some new standards that are shortly, they're being prepared right now, but they'll be coming out, and they will have all the new widths involved in that, in the new standards.
Lauren, you're sure going out with a bang. This could be the longest you've ever addressed us.
That was pretty
Yeah.
interesting.
And quite
Yeah,
technical.
yeah, way to go. Yeah, we're gonna miss you.
We apparently do have someone who can teach us about perking, you know?
Circulation tests and all that.
Okay, other questions for Lauren? Thank you. Okay,
Thanks, Lauren.
so we also are still open for public comment if there's anyone. We did have an attendee online if they would wish to address us on this subdivision.
Not yet.
Nobody? We'll give them a second. Okay. Well, commissioners, we've heard our presentation. We've heard from interested parties. Is there any further discussion? I will be willing to entertain a motion at this point as well and discuss it afterwards.
I have some comments. We've been looking at this one for quite a while. And I've had a lot of different opinions about it. It's very visual in the city as you come up 2700, because it's elevated, it's something you'll see. I mean, everyone will see it coming home. And so I think for that reason, every time I drive in, I look at it and I think, what's that going to turn into? And I think this is good. I really do. I wouldn't have had that same opinion probably 9 months ago, kind of like Brandon mentioned, Commissioner Mason mentioned, we'd all love to see it be a farm. But and then we think, oh, well, what about bigger lots? I don't necessarily think that's the best thing for this spot. I really don't. I think these small lots are going to look nice. I think based on the plans that we've seen, I think it'll, there'll be nice houses and it'll be fairly easy for people to keep their yards up. It's not an HOA, but there's going to be some uniformity to it, which I think will be helpful. And so I think, my thoughts as I've driven home and looked at this, and, and part of our job is to plan, to look at the future. We're trying to get a little bit further out. This one's right on top of us right now, but I think the way it ended up was maybe as good as we could have hoped for. So one thing that I have wondered is where it's closer to commercial, why didn't we do a little bit of commercial along Pleasant View Drive there? I think that could have been a win-win situation. We're this far down the road. It is what it is. I think that could have been nice for the city. I think it could have been nice for the developer. Could have been nice for the values of commercial property, but as it stands, I think it's great. So just wanted to say that.
Thank you. Further comment?
I'll make a motion that we grant preliminary plat approval of Shaw Century Farm subdivision. Subject to the conditions recommended in the staff report. And those conditions did specifically include that it's contingent upon the approval of the city council's decision on the pending rezone and the zoning text amendment.
Thank you. We have a motion.
I'll second it.
We have a motion and a second by Commissioner Barker. Okay, further discussion. My thoughts on this is I echo what Commissioner Webb said. I think and I've said this in there before, I think it fits as a nice transition to a more downtown that it kind of naturally flows to smaller lots. So I do think it's a nice transition. My one reservation with it was that if that's 300 East is going to be a collector road, that those front porches are going to be pretty close to that road. And that was a concern for me. Not a concern that we're having front porches close to a road, but front porches close to that road because of the way that traffic is going to flow. And so I was a little reluctant on that. And that was my only reservation. In general, I think this is a big win for the city.
I think the extra width on that road is going to be really helpful for the city.
Yeah.
I think that the developer was, worked with the city to kind of, and we talked about this several meetings ago, to make that road wider. Who knows what's going to happen with Pleasant View Drive? I'm of the opinion that after thinking about it for a long time, I think changing the way you can go into Pleasant View Drive is a good first step. To me, it makes sense to close it. It really does. A park there, combining some of those things. I know that people who live in Pleasant View may not like that, because it is a nice way to come, but I think people would adjust to that. But I'm grateful that road coming down through it is wider, because I think in the long run, the trade-off of having a few smaller lots and a wider road it's kind of a win-win situation.
And
So,
regarding your commercial, that would have been a mixed bag. I mean, we could have zoned it that way, and I definitely would have supported that. But anytime you get off that main thoroughfare of Washington Boulevard, commercial, we can
true.
zone it. They don't always go there. Do you know what I mean?
Yep.
And frankly, I think businesses have had a harder time existing on 2600. I think just from the turnover
yeah,
than they do along Washington. So, zone it that way, and it will maybe and it will come. But I think this is fine in the way it is.
I think it's a
so-
great public comment. I hadn't considered that, and I think that's a really good
I think
comment.
businesses want lots of traffic, and I don't think
Yeah.
this is going to get as much traffic to really support a lot of business.
Because
along
those
there. So,
businesses right off of Washington and 2600 are always turning over.
yeah.
Yeah, that has turned out to be a bad,
That's true.
Well, parking there stinks.
yeah. And it's hard to get in and out. It's
Hard
not
to get in and
convenient.
out. There's not enough parking stalls, but I don't know how that got done, but so nice business there can't flourish because of a lot of parking.
I guess I'd
Yeah.
also have to remind us that this isn't under this review. This isn't an application for a zone, change.
Sure.
So this has been zoned or recommended to be zoned the way it is.
Right.
And our job now is to review the subdivision. Does it fit what the zone that we recommended?
Good
So,
point, good point.
okay.
I'll miss the farm, but I'll review it.
Further discussion? I'm prepared to vote on this if anyone else is.
Yeah.
Okay, Commissioner Barker, how do you vote?
Yes.
Commissioner Webb, how do you vote?
Yes,
Commissioner Nancarrow?
Yes.
And I'm a yes, and the motion passes. Okay,
thank you.
that was a lot of discussion for something we've already seen a bunch of times.
just trying to make it hard on you.
Yeah, but John Hanson.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
So did Commissioner Nan Carroll make the original motion?
Yeah, seconded by Commissioner Barker. Unanimous vote.
Okay.
Lauren, thanks for all those comments. That was really instructive.
That was interesting, yeah.
And the permeability porosity had a pretty big impact. There's along through there, that water table fine. There's not a lot of clays, one kind of sandy loam,
And for water table isn't necessarily where they're drawing the well water.
right, it's not, they're deeper down in the well water.
Yeah. Okay, we have promised public comment for anyone wishing to comment at this point. For any general comments or regarding anything? I'm assuming we have none. We have no comments. Okay, commissioners, do you have any remarks? I did have a question. I hate to belabor this meeting any longer, but I was interested of why that was an administrative item instead of a legislative item. I felt like the zone wasn't yet completely applied, and so and with the also with the development agreement with the city, I felt like any parameters could be applied. So in an administrative action, I thought like, hey, does this conform to the law? And so
Yeah, I'm happy to.
yeah,
answer that.
please, yeah.
So it's an administrative decision that's subject to a future legislative decision. It's administrative because it's being evaluated as to whether it meets a pending legislative zone change. And so legislative decisions are determining administrative decisions are determining does it meet the criteria of an ordinance. That's why this was administrative. In this case, the question is, does it meet the criteria of a pending ordinance? Does that answer your question?
Okay,
So,
Yeah.
Legislative decisions are what should the law or the ordinance be?
it just
Pass
felt
it.
like it was a time when we could have said, oh no, those houses need to be 10 feet back or something like that, where that's not really what we have with an administrative decision. We say, yes, that fits, or no, that doesn't.
Yeah, the time for that would be, like you already made the decision on the legislation, the text amendment. And so, if you're passing a subdivision or approving subdivision for a new specific zone, then you probably want to have the opportunity to look at both, so that you can, while you're considering the text amendment, so you can say, oh, we want to add this requirement or whatever. So,
I see.
but
Okay.
Yeah.
Great. Commissioners, anything else?
Since we're, only 45 minutes into it. Just kidding.
Or could be 2 minutes from going home.
That's right.
Okay.
And since Lauren's here, so there's a cell tower, I believe, that's over kind of by this area in the public works area, and I've noticed a green crane working on it. What exactly is happening there?
That's a good question.
So they're taking some old equipment off and putting some new stuff on.
Okay.
The rumor at our public works group is that in the cell phone world, there's some fighting going on.
Oh,
And so there'll be some service issues with some carriers in this area for a little while.
oh,
Wow.
that's good to
So
know.
just be aware of that and ready for that.
Okay.
Wow.
The thing that it made me think while I saw that green boom up there is I all of a sudden noticed it. And I think it sounds like by the laughing, I'm not the only one that noticed that. And I wondered, actually, I was like, has that always been there? Is it new? Maybe you guys got some phone calls about that. Maybe you didn't. But what it made me think, and this is in the spirit of some of the training that we've received recently of some of our time ought to be about planning, is do we need to consider, does staff need to consider, height requirements and locations for things like that in the city? That's a pretty visual place, as was commented, you come in on 2700, it's something that's there. It's been almost invisible to me up to this point, and now I notice it when I drive in.
Yeah.
It's like one of those things that in your own house that you did, it's just not quite right. And I look at it and I'm like, oh man, that's tall. And it's right in the, there's this big mountain, but now it's there. And I'm sure I'll ignore it in a year and I won't ever think about it again, but it did make me think, do we want to start thinking about height requirements? And that being said, I have totally changed my mind on something I voted no on, which was the propane tanks. I looked at that as I've driven by and I thought, I I actually am fine with a taller tank, where I was thinking maybe 2 shorter tanks, but I was like, no, that's not a big deal. It doesn't really obstruct anything. Whereas tall cell towers or
But
things
you
like
think
that.
about the dang thing every time you drive by it, don't you?
Well,
Yeah,
that's-
that's the curse
I
of
live in
having
it
this
every
job.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I can tell I'm in good company with that, with everybody here.
We're going
So-
to make, we're going to make propane tanks look like Christmas trees.
Oh, no, put fake stuff on it.
Johnson, like,
Well, I was gonna say, so the city can regulate where towers go in some respects,
Okay.
but we can't regulate height because that's an FCC.
Oh, wow.
so if that thing came in and they said, hey, we're doing some modifications and we're getting it 100 feet taller, there is
Yeah.
gonna be a,
Because the FCC won't let them do it taller than is required to provide the service. And so that's a federal rule that said, hey, no, we're the ones in
okay,
charge.
so what if it's a smokestack instead of a, really though, instead of a,
Then we would have control, but because it's a communication device that the feds have stepped in and say, cities have no business like they still let us say where they can and can't go. And I think our rules basically say it has to be on public property, so schools and things like that.
Mm.
But they don't let us regulate the equipment or the height, or because that's their business.
So do we have the ability to move it if it's on public property? So this is on city property. Could we move it up to like the equestrian arena or something like that if it got higher, taller or something?
So kind of, if depending on how the lease is written, we would have the ability to not renew the lease or things like that. We actually have been approached about another tower up near the equestrian park because of service issues and things like that. To this point, we haven't entered into an agreement, but we actually have declared some, a little bit of property if there is surplus, so a tower can be located on that if we'd like to.
Yeah. And are those things that would come before the planning commission, or are those just staff decisions?
So the site plan should have to come to the planning commission.
Okay.
So there wouldn't be a lot of standards to review, but in theory that you'd see it and make sure that it was meeting the criteria of the code.
Yeah, hopefully this is not coming across as me like trying to be difficult with something like this. It's just,
It's interesting.
You know,
so it felt like something for public comment potentially.
So, John, I'm guessing that the reason why we can't regulate height is because it would either affect the service quality or just general operability of the tower.
Correct. And we do have other communication towers, for example, on Rice Creek, where some of our tanks are. Those are very short because they're so highly positioned that they can broadcast that in a way that doesn't impact, and they're also smaller, and so you don't see them. So, but now you'll look for them when you're up in that area. You'll be like, oh.
but I'm only familiar with height restrictions on buildings and dwellings, and I'm not familiar with any kind of a height restriction on a cell tower or a windmill or anything like that. Do we have a maximum?
Like we do prohibit some things. Like if it's a ham radio antenna, there is, I think, a height restriction. We can't prohibit them, but we do say it can't be taller than this because it's not a commercial activity, it's a private activity. But like, remember those satellite dishes?
Yeah.
Like there was some fighting about whether or not cities could prohibit those. And I think ultimately cities ended up losing, basically saying it's a receiving device for commercial communications. They had to allow them, but no one uses them anymore.
And
So,
people got to know when the Russians are coming.
yeah.
You could build a 400-foot tall watchtower. And like,
Yeah. It seems to me that in our city, a place, and I could be totally wrong on this. Someone could point out something where I'm like, oh, but it seems like at least in our city against the foothills, does seem like a good spot because it would kind of be camouflaged by the rocks and things like that. Whereas when you're further out and you're kind of looking at the vista of the mountains, something that's 40 feet in the air, kind of, you catch it in a different way. But again, people in this panel or in the audience might have the exact opposite opinion that I do right now.
Well, the problem they have against the mountains like that, you could have the sound bouncing weird. So you have to make sure where they put them, how they're set up, the way it bounces off the mountains.
Yeah.
And if you start looking for cell towers, you'll be
find-
surprised
They're
how many
everywhere.
are
They're
there.
everywhere.
Yeah.
Mhm.
So they do try and camouflage them.
Just
and
stick to
the gray
propane tanks.
Helps,
Yeah.
that it kind of blends in, right? But like you said, once you see it, you'll see it. Like you said, like that one piece of molding in your house that's just crooked and no one else sees it except for you. because you're the one who put the nail in it.
Yeah, that cell phone company should have brought in a boom that was gray and not green.
Nobody would have, yeah.
I think that's an excellent thing to bring up. If that's something we wanted to look at, and those are kind of, that is exactly what we were encouraged to do
Yeah.
is plan and think about things like that.
Yeah.
You know, Johnson obviously saw that driving around and made note of that. That's right in line, I think, with what we're supposed to talk about and discuss. Any other comments from anyone?
There was a chat that came in right after we closed, and it just was
Let's-
Stephanie with the General Plan Advisory Committee, who said she agrees with the approval and thinks it's a great fit for the area.
Oh, good.
Okay, thanks, Stephanie. That's
Yeah,
helpful to
thanks for
hear.
that feedback.
Yeah, sometimes, especially, you know, sometimes when nobody's speaking up, we don't know, we don't get a lot of feedback a lot of times on, you know, so that is nice to hear that.
So
Yeah, just only when it's positive feedback though.
Yeah.
Again.
I talked to John about this afternoon, but there's a new book out that's called Ground Rules. It's actually by John's father. It's why are you laughing?
I'm laughing because it almost feels like I'm like
Endorsing
Brandon
it.
endorsed my dad's
Yeah.
book. And that's not what's happening.
Grow that inheritance.
I second that. Oh, no.
No, anyway, it's a really good book. It's about land use issues and particularly land use law here in the state and legal precedents that have been developed through court cases. It's a lot more readable than I just made it sound. So yeah, I went to a training a couple weeks ago, an all-day session. It's actually one of the best trainings I've been to, you know, dealing with this, because the legal decisions that are made in the state set the parameters for the decisions that planning commissions can make. So, and also the ordinances that we you know, that this planning commission and the city council can pass. And so I think that's really important stuff, because if you don't know what those parameters, what you're just talking, you know, in the pie in the sky type of stuff. So anyway, John's laughing.
I'm not laughing at you. I'm laughing at the fact that at Sunday dinner, my dad informed us that it was the best-selling land use book for Utah on Amazon.
Wow.
How many?
How many others are there? He said you'd be surprised, but
Well, so I believe every member of the commission will be getting a free copy of it, as well as the city council.
Oh, cool.
Oh, nice.
Oh, cool.
So that's why I mentioned it.
That's
It wasn't-
cutting
it
into your
wasn't just
inheritance.
yeah.
I wasn't just saying like, go to Amazon and get this book. I was saying there should be one coming your way, so.
Oh,
Well,
cool. That's cool.
you know, that being said, I think kind of in spirit of gratitude, you know, Lauren retiring and your knowledge and, you know, the work of staff and John and your relationship with your dad, I think, you know, it's nice to acknowledge occasionally how lucky we are in North Ogden City to have the resources and the effort and the technical expertise to be able to continue to plan and organize our city, and just very, very grateful. You know, as someone who was raised here, moved away, came back because I love this city. Just very grateful for all the hard work that people are doing, as well as their training and knowledge. It's not just hard work, it's experience and knowledge that, you know, helps our city. So thank you.
Amen.
Well, and the state and the league recognized it, and he did just text me back, and it is going out to all council members and commissioners in the state.
Oh, really?
So-
Wow. State.
Yeah.
Okay, cool.
So
Wow.
it really will be the best sold.
That's why, yeah.
But
When
I-
you give
I
it
also
away,
think-
it's.
And I also think I'm pretty sure that he's not getting paid for it. He's basically, it's the printing cost to get them out to everybody's.
That's cool.
So
Wow.
it, because he didn't write it to make money. He-
Is there a byline in it by the city attorney of North Ogden, so that North Ogden gets a little credit for this? Or?
No, I actually had a credit in his previous book because I helped him edit it, but this one I was too busy, and so,
Or a conflict of interest, right?
yeah. I don't know. I do have a signed copy of it though.
Oh, that's good.
So,
Okay,
That's cool.
Brandon, do you have other remarks for us besides that?
No.
Okay, then from our city attorney and manager.
no, other than just as you do get it in emails about employee activities or things, no, you are always invited. You know, we want to be a resource. A good example is we have an employee assistant program, which is, you know, if someone's having trauma or, you know, just having rough times, you and your family qualify for that as well. So you have access to all the same things that everybody else does, because you technically qualify as employees. So And it extends like, if Brandon's having an issue with his teenager, right, because there's only one right now, but that it's a resource, and put it in perspective, even the seasonal pool employees get the same thing, so it's a benefit to everyone that we pay for, whether it's used or not. And we've actually been really excited because the EAP, we use it more than most of their groups, which they really like, because that means we're helping more people. So just know that any of those emails that you see come across, you're entitled to everything that's on those. So
Is this the first time we've had an EAP?
we've had it for about 2 years now.
Oh, really? Is it through IHC or?
No, it's,
Crystal.
well, yeah, Blomquist now.
Okay. Some of those have, I mean, I have a human resources background. Some of those have even like some financial counseling, like limited, like,
Mhm.
and stuff like that. You call them, hey, I have this problem, and they work out what they can, with maybe over the phone. And if not, then they'll refer you to someone and that kind of stuff. So, and okay, so sorry for the testimonial, but I never put much stake into that. I didn't see the benefit for myself and all sorts of stuff until I started to see people actually use it and what they used it for. And, hey, I got in this situation and this, I got these cops coming in and it's putting a lot of stress on me, and people were coming to me and like, it was super helpful. And so I actually do think it's very helpful if it's something that you can use for sure. Maybe you couldn't use it 99.9% of the time, but there's this moment in your life when things are like piling up, and then it's great to have there. So
I think it's great to hear that the city's utilizing that. I mean, it's likely to have better health and quality of life for people at the city, mental health, everything. It's a real issue. And to be able that people are taking advantage of that EAP is encouraging. That creates a better culture in our community. So the city inspector goes out and he's not depressed, that's a good thing.
Yeah, they have some online webinars that they do about on average once a month, and sometimes it varies. They'll do like 2 or 3 in a month, and then they'll skip one, but it's averages once a month, and they are really great. Like, they're not just if you're experiencing problems, they're also like how to optimize how you're approaching different situations in your life.
yeah.
Like relationships or whatever, get a different take on things, and they're first class. So
What we use in my work, we use it for I work at a financial institution, and like if a branch gets robbed, then the next day most of those employees don't show up to work. Instead, they meet with the EAP, send someone in, and they talk to them. They talk to them about why, their fear and where that comes from, and it really helps them cope. And because believe it or not, like someone passes your teller and next to you a note or whatever, and your branch, and that has an impact on you. I've noticed from being in human resources, right? Like I don't feel safe anymore, even though no violence happened, right? But there was this threat, and then that really helps lower the temperature. They understand why they're having these thoughts and things like that.
It's so critical. I mean, being in the Coast Guard, every big case, always we didn't call it EAP, we call it critical incidents, but you meet the day after, talk it through, but it really helps with any kind of PTSD. So
Yeah.
You're absolutely right about like any kind of traumatic kind
Sure,
of thing.
yeah.
So
like that.
psilocybins aren't the only way to approach PTSD.
What's that?
Psilocybins.
What is that?
Never
Like
mind.
medication?
Yeah, sort of.
We
Yeah,
are.
it has a lot of data on it, actually.
This is a different planning commission
Yes,
meeting.
it is.
Okay, all right. And it's about to end. Is there anything else before we adjourn?
Make a motion to adjourn.
I'll second it.
Motion to second, all in favor, voice vote?